10x your service design offering with Smapley. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smapley.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smapley, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Aluminium is a critical material for digital. Since 1970, there has been a 559% increase in its mining. A typical smartphone can be 14% aluminium, while up to 50% of a laptop can be made of steel and aluminium. Pat and Nuala Geoghegan are farmers from Askeaton, County Limerick. Soon after, the Aughinish Alumina aluminium mining factory established itself nearby, their cattle began to get sick and die. And the Geoghegan family got sick. Their beautiful farm became the killing fields, as they now called it. The pollution drove them from their land, drove them from their home. It broke their health, broke them financially. The Irish state abandoned them. Not simply abandoned them, deliberately blocked their ability to get to the truth, on multiple occasions losing evidence that could prove what was poisoning them and their animals. They, their animals, nature, had to foot the bill, paid the price for progress, for jobs, for industry. I met Nuala and Pat in Adair, County Limerick, on a calm August day in 2022. Kind and gentle people, unfailingly polite, clearly a couple still deeply in love and hugely supportive of each other. Pat, suffering from severe heart problems, shows stoicism in the face of enormous injustice. My wife, Josilda, was with me during the interview. On other occasions, the interviewee would start focusing exclusively on me because I'd be asking the questions. Not Nuala and Pat. They regularly made eye contact with Josilda and tried to involve her, where appropriate, in the conversation. This is what we call decency and good manners. It is not something you can easily manufacture. The Geoghegans are decent people. Pat and Nuala's voices never sound shrill or hectoring. They know their facts. They are angry. They speak their minds in calm and measured sentences, quietly determined, not broken. We can twist and turn the words. We can rationalise about green tech until the sickened cows come home. But we cannot get away from the fact that we rich people, we tech people, have benefited mightily from the sickening of nature. With our net zero fallacies and renewable energy greenwashing, we can build a future on lies, just like so much of our present and past is built on lies. There is nothing green about digital. It is the most artificial and among the most toxic things there is. Digital can never be green. It can only be less dirty. To mine for digital requires incredible intensity and enormous quantities of toxic waste. Digital is voracious for materials. It devours the earth in the pursuit of electric vehicles, wind turbines and solar panels, smartphones and laptops. This is what our innovation and creativity has wrought. We are bad ancestors, terrible stewards of the land, soil and water, and we have no time to even listen, so busy are we designing, coding, creating content, user testing. We will destroy life in our universe so as to create our pathetic metaverse, where nature must perish so the bitcoins can flourish. It's worth taking the time to listen to Nuala and Pat, to realise a tiny fraction of the damage we have done and continue to do, and to ask, how might we consume less? How might we repair and maintain more? How might we slow down?
Well, the bauxite that's been used by the alumina plant in Askeaton usually comes from Guinea, but it comes from South Africa, it comes from other places, but the problem is if it's bad quality, there's a lot of caustic and other things added to it to get out the bad impurities so that it can make good alumina. But I think, we've always looked at it, the dangers of it when it comes to Ireland or comes to Askeaton or whatever. But it comes in by ships to the jetty on the Aughinish Alumina plant. It's offloaded. It goes onto belts that brings conveyor belts that brings it up through the plant, and it's stored in sheds, and then
the raw material.
Yeah, that's the raw material, the bauxite, and then it's put through the plant in to make the final product. But even with the offloading of it, is that whatever stuff is left over, it's usually pushed off the jetty, and it goes into the estuary, and it heaps at the bottom of the jetty. That means that it kind of like a stockpile over the years, it compacts, and then there's a problem with ships coming in. So they do dredging, which means that they just, it's like a plough. It just sits on top of the bauxite if it's down there, and it just pulls it out into the Shannon. That to us is dangerous because we feel that the whatever's down there should be taken up through the plant and put into these ponds out there and stored. But that's extra costs. And look, we know they don't care about the environment. The EP, we've reported that to the EPA, and the EPA can't find it down there, even though that it's the dogs in the street knows in how they were dumping it. So like that the EPA, we've lost confidence in the EPA, and that the EPA just looks after these big multinationals. But our environment is destroyed with this going on. That's the dredging. That's the dangers. Once it's pulled out and just it disperses, and it'll head down to Ballybun and places like that, and it just damages whatever in the water before it. Fish's eyes and things get burned. But so look, it's in these open sheds, these bauxite sheds. Then it taken by conveyor belt again into the plant, into the process section of it, and they start to make the alumina. But as I said, like we have documents to show that the bauxite can be inferior quality. So once you have something of inferior quality, you've got to add what the likes of caustic into the process to break down the bad impurities. And in doing so, you have that problem then of, say, the likes of caustic being pushed up through the chimneys out into the air, and Nuala talked there about the burning that it does to our animals, to our eyes, and everything on the farm. But like, it's just not bauxite alone. As I said, it's these other chemicals that gets added, where you're looking at other problems.
What sort of chemicals?
The caustic is one of the main things. Yeah. And the other side, and the other side of
arsenic.
the thing, So like these chemicals, look, we have a list of what's involved. The EPA will tell you, and they're on record. The Irish EPA are on record to say that they don't know what's contained in the bauxite. Like for an agency to admit that, it's an absolute, it's criminal. Because if this bauxite is coming in, first thing that any EPA or Ireland needs to know, what are the dangers of those chemicals, whether it is individually on their own or whether you queue them together. People need to know if there's dangers. Now, they've used the European directives. It was classed as hazardous, and they've
Prior to 2000?
Yeah, to 2000, and then they changed it to non-hazardous.
Accommodate, because if they didn't, the Aughinish Alumina at that stage would have had to comply with, more laws and things.
Right.
So the Irish EPA reclassified it from hazardous to non-hazardous.
To facilitate,
The company didn't change the process one bit, but just
Just use
Stroke
European
pen,
law
yeah.
to European
Get it back
directive
in under.
to get it back in, and that's the way. Even though when it comes down to our farm, it's hazardous, but when it's down on the alumina plant, it's
On the open
non-hazardous.
tailing ponds.
So like and the other way as well to make it non-hazardous is that they've used a kind of a process in the testing of it, and it gets washed and things in such a way that it gets diluted down to bring it in under a non-hazardous reading. So we're getting the full whack of it, where they have time to deal with it and getting it tested and getting it sorted out in their own way.
The way it should.
And Europe comes in then to facilitate them, in how this is done. So when this comes up through the plant, the bauxite, and all this is added, you have the waste is pumped out into these tailing ponds. They're 450 acres in size. At the moment, they're storing over 50 million tons of toxic waste. Yeah, that's a low estimate. The EPA classes it as about 35 million, but they have allowed Aughinish to keep it down and get away with it. So if we were to call it today in 2022, we would be saying that you're looking at 75 million tons at least down there. Now, so not alone that, is that when the ponds were constructed in 1983, they were allowed to not line these ponds so that there wouldn't be any seepage into the estuary.
When you say a pond, explain what a pond is to people.
A pond would be a big hole in the ground.
Yeah.
That's just about it. And the first one was about 250 acres in size, but there was about 150 acres of that never lined. So and
now it's 400 acres.
It's 450 acres now.
Oh.
So but from the rest has been lined, but you're looking at this black type lining. Now, as Nuala has pointed out earlier to you, there is that when these chemicals interact with each other over years or even individually, we believe there is no lining. A hole being made in it, or eroded or whatever, and that there has never been any checks down there to see it. Now, also, what we had looked for in that when the first 150 acres or so were never lined, is that when they did the second pond of 200 acres, that we had pushed that they would, when they had it lined, is that they would take this 150 acres of the material from line one, from the first pond, move it into the second pond that was lined, and then come back in and do your lining of this. But,
first tailing pond.
But because this would cost them money or whatever, it was never going to be pushed on them. So the EPA licensed a facility in 1998, which gave them permission to pollute, because they knew it wasn't lined. They knew that it was going to just head off into the Shannon, and then it's a facility that's been given a license to pollute, because they just didn't want to upset this company, and they didn't care about the environment. So the other thing that we look at is that we've always been pushing for, if chemicals are sitting there since 1983, how do they interact with each other? Like you have arsenic, you have arsenic, you have uranium, you have cadmium, you have strontium. Like you have dangerous chemicals that sits there. How do they entwine in each other? How does they affect each other? And when it blows, are we getting them individually affecting our human health or our animals, or are we getting them changed in such a way that it makes them more lethal, that when we out farming or walking, that the particles are at the lowest level, at the smallest level, 2.5 or whatever, in that we inhale them through into our lungs, our animals inhale them.
Eat off the grass?
Yeah, they're eating it off the grass, they're drinking it in the trucks. What are the dangers to that? Because if you keep putting chemicals on top of other chemicals, you have a change of bauxite coming in. It may not be the same as the first loads that came in 1983. They could be way different. They could come from another mine, and that there would be, every load is not the same. There is that bit of a change, and if they sit there and they're packed together and whatever, then when they're dry, because of the ponds the way they get it out into these open ponds is that it comes as a liquid form, and it's allowed to dry, and the pipe is in the middle of the pond, so it's left to come down to all the levels, and every layer is allowed to dry then, but it's 32 meters above sea level, so like the higher you go means that the wind is able to whip the red, when it's dried, the red dust onto our farms. It travels. It's just not alone. Is it in Askeaton or whatever? It travels to Mayo. It travels to Nagal. It travels all over the place. What the EPA were doing before was they were saying, "Oh, the Sahara dust." But the Sahara dust wasn't coming all the time at all. It was Aughinish with their red dust that was travelling over Ireland. But the best way that the EPA could get Aughinish out of the problem was to say that it was Sahara dust. We know that the Sahara dust does come to Ireland, but it's not coming that the amount of times that they're saying, like, because we have the red dust now. And the other thing that the EPA can't maintain is that it can come onto our farm. These ponds are 450 acres size, but the EPA will not admit that they come onto our farm, but they can admit that they can come from the Sahara to Ireland or onto our farm. But we're 5 miles as the crow flies, but they won't admit that it's Aughinish that comes on to ours. So, there is so many things there, as we say, with these chemicals now,
that we don't know about. They haven't answered. We've asked, but they don't.
They won't do it. Because it'll connect Aughinish to causing the problems. It'll be classed as a nuisance if it comes onto your farm, but it also, they could get caught for damage, and they would have to pay compensation to farmers or whatever, or they're putting the food chain at risk. That will not be allowed to happen. They're a Russian company now. They're owned by Olga Deripaska. He's a personal friend of Putin's. So, we have our highest of our politicians like Leo Varadkar and others who can visit this plant to ask Mr. Deripaska, are you okay? We'll ensure that you won't be upset. We'll ensure that that you'll be able to keep working, and we'll ensure that there'll be no sanctions on you, because we can use it as you're producing a product which is used for alumina, and we need alumina out there. We need to make our planes. We need to make our phones. We need to make everything regarding it, so we can get around that for you, Mr. Deripaska, and I'm sure your friend Putin will be very impressed with us. But we can do that for you, but we won't help out our own Irish industry, or we won't visit the farm of Pat and Nuala Geoghegan and other ones in the area, because we treat our Irish citizens as third-class citizens when it comes to that. But we'll put you in there because you're Russian, and as first-class citizens against our own. We will not have you upset, but we have no problem in leaving Pat Geoghegan or Nuala get their heart attacks or miscarriages. But that's how bad Ireland has gone. That's the cover-up that they will go to protect these people at all costs. Life means nothing to them, and I'm sure Nuala can tell you what happens on our farm when it does come on.
Because the materials, basically, as you say, are essential to the manufacturing process of the modern products that we...
Yeah, that you need. Yeah, well, maybe I said that we need, maybe we don't need them as much as we say we need them, but we will make sure that nothing will, once we can once we are able to have a phone and that we can ring Putin on his hotline, we're happy enough with that.
Yeah. So you were saying earlier that there's two sources of pollution or chemical. One is in relation to that red dust, and the other is coming from the chimneys.
Yeah.
So So that's the
manufacturing
process.
Yeah. There is two process, and everything is from the mining, process. Because once that bauxite comes, it produces the waste, which is the red mud.
So what happens? It goes through a chemical mixing or a firing or what?
Yeah, it's the bare process that is called, and there is calciners. There's all these.
So they stir it and mix it.
Yeah, and it goes through a certain heat and whatever. But as I said,
it's not an innocent process.
No. And you can't change it. It's not like making sweets, you know what I mean? You can't change from that process. It's got to stay the same. But the problem is back in the early 90s when we really had so much of the problems was that they were producing so much of it, but when it got up the chimneys, because they were using oil which had a 4.5% sulfur content, it meant that the chimneys were starting to close in because it was sticking to the chimneys, which which means that they had to do a soot blowout, and the problem was that the chemicals used in that process to try and clean what came from the mining process that was going through the plant was even as bad as the thing, because we have a list of those, but the nickel was very high in that, the vanadium that was used was very high in that, and what they had to do was to blow that up the chimneys, clean the chimneys, and that was done 365 days of the year because they could not afford, if these chimneys start to close up in that plant, they cannot shut that plant down, because if that stops, they can't get it going again. This plant has to be ticking over, even with shutdowns. It just got to be ticking over because they cannot restart this plant. So they had to keep ahead of that. So we had the process from the mining going through the plant. We had the caustic being added and other chemicals that we haven't been taught about to make bad to be good, so that they could get good alumina. We had the soot being blown out with these other dangerous chemicals like
inferior oil.
Yeah, so there was no break. It when it left the mining in Guinea, South Africa, or wherever, we were in trouble once it came to Ireland, and we were in big trouble. And to this day we are in trouble because of the cancers in the area, the human health problems, the miscarriages, and the whole lot. But myself and Nuala took it upon ourselves to fight, to raise awareness. We have been in the Dáil protesting. We have been in a lot of places protesting ourselves. We never asked for anyone to help us. But they damaged our kids, they destroyed our lives, and the first thing was, you can go and you can die without saying a word, but we're the opposite. Before we'll die, we're going to be vocal, and we're going to stay vocal.
Well, we started having problems back in the 90s, the late 70s, late 80s, 90s. This company started, our company, Aughinish Alumina, started in 1983, and just problems started occur within farm animals. The late 80s into the 90s, and during the 90s, the middle 90s, they really took off. There was animals suddenly. Farmers were experiencing things. I can only speak for our own farm. I was farming with my father before we got married, and my dad, the vet would only come in maybe once or twice a year, and one of them times was to do the annual hair test. But all of a sudden, Dad, we noticed, we got married in 1987. 92, I had my first little one, Amanda. And that year, the animals our baby calves never went out to sheds. They were constantly coming down with pneumonia, as we presumed, coughing. And we presumed, naturally, something like that, or high temperatures in an animal and baby calf, you presume from your previous knowledge, this must be pneumonia or something. But they never tried. Every time we tried to put them out into the grass, we had to get them back in. They were all sick, and the vet was coming in and coming out and giving them antibiotics and whatever, and a lot of them died, and they just didn't thrive. Dad died because there was no mobile phones at the time, and some first of our animals that were really dying. We used to take them off in the springtime, the following spring in '93, off down to an outside land, my mum's land. And because he found a couple of them dead, and his land was landlocked, so no mobile phone like we have these days. So he had to rush down and try and ring us on a landline to come down and try and help him. Got a massive heart attack and died there and then instantly. So that kind of threw part of myself totally into the farming, and we were trying to deal with our grief, losing my dad, the animals dying, cows not showing up in calf all of a sudden, trying to keep the calf alive, trying to keep the cow in calf, trying to get a live calf out of her. The animals we had not thriving, getting sick, the cow getting sick. And in our particular farm, it didn't suddenly just die overnight. They went on maybe for 3 or 4 months, and a little sore that might be the size of the button on your phone, the push button that opens your iPhone, would suddenly be a dinner plate size by the time the animals come to death. And by that time we had so much antibiotics, every type of medicine into her. Our veterinary bills were building up. At the same time, Patrick's health was deteriorating. He was constantly having to go to our late GP, Dr. Anne Tehan, for antibiotics because he was, as she thought, constantly getting reoccurring chest infections. That's what it appeared like. In later years, because of having met someone down the line and educated ourselves through going into libraries and reading books and things, we discovered it was just agitation from the chemicals flowing from Aughinish Alumina, from the company agitating and your body tries to expel it, and it appears like you have chest infections. Same with our animals. Our animals were just inhaling this, eating this, everything. We entered in '96. We entered into a 2-year state-led investigation because they had acknowledged at this stage that there was a lot of animals, farm animals, dairy, beef, whatever, dying in this part of Askeaton. Just a coincidence, it was near Aughinish Alumina, and all of a sudden they decided, I suppose we'll have to try and do something about these poor old farmers because they were kicking up. Farmers were kicking up. We were one of 5. That's how bad we were. We were taken on because we filled up senses of what had happened to our animals and what was happening to ourselves. And we discovered to our shock that we were number 6. Number 5 of the worst farmers didn't go in, so we were taken on as number 5. We thought, this is our saviour, they're going to find, they had the Department of Agriculture, they had Tagish, they had the EPA who was newly formed, oh God, this is great, they're going to help us save our animals, and save our livelihood, because our livelihood was going down the drain, and we were only something like 17 days into the investigation. At our vets, which were new to our farm, they were there about a year and something, to write a damning report of what it was like, which we were some of the worst farmers. So it started a catalogue of letters between us and the investigators that were doing it. While we learned very quickly not to trust these people, and we recorded everything. If they came in and they blooded our animals, we looked at split samples because we realised at this stage we couldn't trust them. No, we had no money to do anything with the split samples, but they were aware we had the split samples stored somewhere, We wouldn't be if your animal collected from the farm, it was dead and was taken away for an autopsy, you weren't allowed to go with that animal and see how the autopsy was performed, or if an autopsy was performed, or anything like that. So you got maybe a 1-page, a half-a-page report on your animal, and it was all what you had done. So this went on, and while they were on our farm for the 2-year investigation, the local liaison veterinary officer between us and the bigger investigation actually lived close to me. And he used to come out and record it, and he actually started writing down about our cattle had airway problems, just like they were smokers. So by the time we came out of the investigation 2 years later, they didn't call us bad farmers. They didn't come down that side, but they were one of the ones that didn't call bad farmers, because my father had never bought in animals. We were a closed herd, and we had very good records of who every cow was out of, and the calf, and their name with all our animals named. And for a finish, the man that was coming in could even know that was small Dan or small Blondie or whatever, because strange enough, some animals would succumb more to pollution, as does the human. We learned over time that I would react differently, the female would react differently to the male. Patrick, I had miscarriages around the same time as my animals were having miscarriages, I didn't get the respiratory problems as bad as Patrick did. He got them very bad. It was just, and that's common knowledge now that the female and the male will react different to various things, Same within the animal. My daughter, Amanda, she never was on an antibiotic until she was playing one day under a tree. We had a swing under the tree, and she went back and she was swinging in it, and she just said she didn't feel well when I came down to her. And it went on for 2 years. That child went from being no antibiotics. Our doctor had a wonderful GP, and she had been friends with the guy. Now, when I say we went into an investigation for 2 years, there was a very minute side to it, of human health side to it. They did a little survey where a nurse would write down what were your things, picked a few people in the area and you kept kind of a health diary. That was it. They came in, they used to blood our animals. There was no blooding where the human was concerned, and we just turned around and we said, surely the human is more important than the animal, and you should be doing as much for the human, and oh no, there's no need for any of that, But we convinced, our GP finally convinced Dr. Kevin Keller, who was the head of the very minute side of the health side, to start taking blood samples from us. He couldn't tell us. We just took them in because he said, I can't tell you what to do. I don't know what to test for because I don't know what's below in that company. The chemicals that are being used or what's in it. We could tell him what was in it because it was there if you went looking for it, the EPA, but the EPA wouldn't tell you straight out. But if you went actually looking, you could figure out what the EPA knew what was in it.
From toxicologists in England that they brought in to tell them what was going on. They told him what to look for, caustic aluminium and things like that. But they kept that quiet from us all.
Yeah.
In case you'd look for it.
So after 2 years of giving in all these bloods, we gave in something like 20 different bloods. My daughter Amanda's bloods were she was taken into the regional hospital, which is now UHL, University Hospital Limerick. And there was 5 vials of blood taken from her. That's just one example. Those bloods mysteriously ended up being missing, even though we were told those very vials of blood were sent to Dublin and London for testing. Horrified.
Against the list of chemicals from Aughinish that we had supplied.
By doctors. We weren't just told this, we were told this by 2 doctors, They were missing. Now, I never personally delivered stuff. My doctor took bloods, took hair samples, the nurse even used to come out and collect samples from us. Mm-hmm. They were giving in over 2 years, and all of a sudden all these samples went missing. After we were told that they had been gone manned samples. She was only 5 going on 6 at the time, Seriously, we were looking for the results. We were told, I remember being told on an answer machine that some of the results by Dr. Paul McKeown, he stood over this in an internal inquiry that was done about our missing samples. He actually stood over that he was told that some of the samples were back and the results were back and some people waiting on other results. And we kept looking for the rest of these results, nothing coming, until eventually I got something like a 5-liner letter telling me all the samples were lost.
And Aughinish went on to be granted an IPC license straight away and cleared of any wrongdoing in the state investigation.
Well, you were teaching yourself, you used to go down and with money we didn't really have, remember, we were farmers, so we were relying on our animals to bring in money, our cows weren't going in calves, so that meant, they were dying, we lost 79 animals, no, we were on a medium-sized farm, so we weren't able for these losses, and we've never recovered from those financial losses, because I lost half of the land, all my mom's land, because of banks closing on us and things because we stood up. We feel that a lot of we suffered because we stood up to these authorities, like, you know, like banks foreclosed on us even when we were paying loans, like, you know, phone lines would be, you know, phone, because we missed one payment of a phone, like, bill, like, you know, phone was cut off, like. But, so, like, farmers were threatened, some of the farmers were threatened, like, one of the farmers involved with us in the investigation, because he was standing up as well. The milk lorry, passed his farm and didn't collect his milk.
A lot of intimidation.
And then she went on, like, you know. And then other farmers actually, there was a vegetable farmer, like, you know, a garden farmer, like, you know, he was afraid to say anything because he was afraid that his produce wouldn't be bought, like, you know. So a lot of intimidation. We lived through a lot of intimidation.
And still do to this day.
Yeah, we still do to this day, like, you know. We probably got the first heart attack in 2009.
From emissions.
Yeah, from emissions. Like, there was a serious black cloud and something just told us. We ran over and we got our second daughter Megan out of school, like, out of national school. We made up some excuse and collected her. But we felt there's something about this black cloud. And came over our farm. Like 48 hours later, he had a heart attack. And I should have been imprisoned. Because when we did his bloods, like, because he took urine samples and
the levels of arsenic and all of that.
I should have been in prison.
As for poisoning me, like
calcium, iron, like, you know.
There was arsenic and lead and things like that, like, you know. So,
and they were only the ones we could afford to look for. The only big plus we had during our time was that we got a German vet in. Look at our animals. Just treat our animals normally, like, because we fell out naturally with our other vets, like, you know, and this man, like, he didn't come down on our side, he didn't come down on the side of the company. He looked at the evidence, he collected water samples, scrapings from our tanks, like, he collected tissue samples and all the samples. He did postmortems on our animals, like, on the farm, with just us, like, you know. But he took whatever he was to take for the mad cow disease. He was totally legal in what he did, like, and how he conducted, like, you know. He knew what he was doing.
Like, these were our cows with names on, and we had to stay there and he'd open them, and we'd have to, because
it was horrible.
We hardened up very quick, because when the animal was being taken away, we'd only be told, it was pneumonia that the animal died of. It wasn't a case of, look, it could have led to other things that led to the So, like, he was able to tell us, and he was able to find
show us as he was taking
the
samples,
kidneys. All the kidneys had been enlarged.
Or the liver, or the way that the liver would be tied onto the walls of the animal, like, you know.
So he was able to show us.
The lungs, when he cut the lung open, they were calcified, you know, down along.
So, like, they were walking around for a year or two when they should have been dead 2 years, because we were
some animals, some other farmers, just far from us, that's crow flies, maybe about half a mile, maybe something like. Their animals just actually died standing up. They were walking, and then collapsed. Gone. Didn't even collapse, they died in their feet.
And then
because the further away you go, we're sitting here in a dairy at the moment. The further you got away from the plant, from the mushroom effect, we're sitting here on a lovely big umbrella, and we can't know true reading, but there's a thing called a mushroom effect. And the closer you are to the plant, the less effects, because stuff is going further away. The further away, the more geological effects you have, like, as the wind carries and, you know, it drops particles. The heavier particles drops first, and then the lighter ones will go further along.
And these were coming both from the chimneys and from the red dust.
The open.
So they were often mixing.
Yeah.
You were getting a mix of both.
And as well, at that time, the salt cake
is another waste product.
It's another waste product. Right. It contains all these hazardous
oxalate. It contains oxalate, and that's a cancerous material, and that's dumped on top of the mud.
At the time, there was little cells. I don't know how big, because we were never allowed into this company. The only person never been allowed into this company. They'd be burying them, and then they'd come along, the red mud, the waste, and they'd cover up the cells. we're told now they don't do that anymore. They just go
And the
out.
salt cake, how does it occur?
Salt cake is another waste byproduct from the making of, through the mining process, or through the bauxite that comes in, that this is a leftover.
A waste.
Yeah. It's a cancerous material. It's very dangerous, and it's taken by a truck out onto these ponds and just dumped on top. As Nuala was saying, they used to come out and dig a hole in the red mud,
Cells, they call them.
put in the byproduct.
And when it's filled,
They'd cap it over. But by the time they'd even cap it over, the wind was taking it and it was coming onto our farm. So you were being exposed to the red mud from the mining process. You were exposed to the caustic. You were exposed to the salt cake, and you were exposed to the soot blowing.
Yeah.
So you had 4 or 5 different sections within this process, but all stemmed again from once it was taken out of the mine, we were exposed. We have read horrendous articles about how these people are exposed out in the mines and how they're paid nothing and how they're exposed and lung problems and the dust and the whole lot. But
the end process it's the same result as the human as the start process.
It's nearly way worse because you're adding those extra chemicals, which isn't in the process, as they put in the digger or whatever, or they blow them out. They'll get out of the mine, and that's the one product, and that's gone. But once it went out from the mine, you had all these extra things coming into play, with being added in the whole lot, and now it's sitting there, accumulating together and blowing all over Ireland, and we're all exposed to it.
Like, there's a lot of cancer. I mentioned when we met about there's a funeral of a child, teenager or so going on, but like there's a lot of cancer, a lot of, like Dr. Kevin Kelleher, he, like, when we tried to bring this up to him at the DEPA final report on the Askeaton thing was done back in 2001, and we tried to question him on it below at a public meeting. Like, his answer to, what did he say? What? Show me a child with...
Yeah, that was Government Tipperary.
Oh, yeah.
He said, show me a child with a 2 heads and 3 legs.
But that was his thing as well, like, you know, that, I'd say, we've met people who did this health diet that I mentioned earlier on, and if one child had asthma and your other child didn't have asthma, they focused in on the child that had nothing. And that came from the mother, like, you know, and there has been numerous stories of that.
And the other way they had got around it was that we produced our own study in the Kappa area of within 700 of a population that was either 60 or 70 that had cancer. But when we brought that to Dr. Kevin Keller and even to the Taoiseach, who was Minister for Health at the time in 2001, they came back and said there was no problem. What they did was they produced an area next to it that had a DED area of 4,000 population. They brought in the 4,000 population into the 700, which meant they were able to dilute the problem of where the cancers was to get out of it. So they have all the tricks of the trade, like, you know, and but like, we don't have the power.
We don't have the financial,
you know, as two people to be able to. We can only expose it as much as we can.
We sat down there, last year, was it? Or the year before COVID struck, like, with another person, and like, we just went through and just did what she knew and we knew of cancers in the area. This woman has lost her child cancer, like, to a very rare cancer, sarcoma.
Yeah.
And she knows of other children that have them. Like, it's supposed to be very rare. It's not so rare at all in West Limerick. You know, but we just have our general knowledge in the area, like, an amount of cancer that's evolved. It also causes heart.
Yeah. And men having to get bypassed like I have is huge because the farmers are out there in you know, farming, and they're out in the land, and they're out there, and I'm not saying that women aren't out there, because they are out there, right? But they may be in more than the men, and it seems that the farmers are getting a lot of heart bypasses, getting heart attacks and things like that.
Or respiratory problems, asthma, you know, stuff like that. Like, we can show you an article from the Lancet journal, like, which is a medical medical journal, like, and it can show Patrick left a triple bypass. It can show you Because he never drank, he never smoked, like, you know what I mean? But we're smoking in this company. We might as well be smoking, like, you know.
Yeah.
But like that.
It comes into your homes, like, you know. We're not safe inside your home. We're not safe.
It is airborne. And once it's airborne, if it was in the water, you can control it somewhat maybe. But once it's airborne, it gets out, and there's no.
And there is no mask, like Dr. Paul Connaught, as he said, there is no mask known to men to protect. Yeah. These small, minute particles.
Like Professor Paul Connaught came over from America now, and he had talked about the red stuff coming onto our farm, like, and he says, how do you know if red stuff is on their farm? Well, you know that they have black Wellingtons on. They walk through their fields, and when they come out, they're red, right?
If you're interested in these sorts of ideas, please check out my book, Worldwide Waste, at gerrymcgovern.com. To hear other interesting podcasts, please visit thisishcd.com.